I'm Jonny Enoch, and today we are in Luxor on the Nile cruise on the Ancient Mysteries tour of Egypt. And we have with us world-famous Egyptologist and hieroglyphics expert Mohamed Ibrahim, researchers Chuck Vanderbyl and Jonathan Hauge. Now, I've been researching monoatomic white gold, or ormus, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements for some time now. And when we were over visiting the Abydos Temple on this tour, we made a remarkable discovery about what the temple potentially could have been used for when Ergebet, who's behind the camera, had spotted a relief on the wall that she recognized from a presentation I was giving recently. Now, I've been talking to Mohamed about this for some time, and I've been telling him about Mfktz, or white gold. Now, he is a very scholarly academic person, and he said, Johnny, I need to see more proof before I will give any validation to this or any veracity. And when we started to come together, all of our perspectives, as you're going to hear today, it started to all come together when Mohamed took a closer look at the reliefs. Mohamed, can you tell us how that happened?
Yes, we were in Abydos Temple and we were talking about a certain symbol, and I can understand that this symbol means cake. And then when you pointed at a small text, I took the picture of it and I didn't pay attention for the first 10 seconds, but then I realized it had the word white. So I can easily now say it means white cake.
So up here we have what is the Mfktz. They're feeding these cakes. What does that say, Mohamed?
According to the basic meaning, which I don't agree much with it, it's saying the white, the hedge, white sha'it, white bread or white cake.
There
But
we go.
don't have a cake this type actually. Our cake, we all know the style of the cake.
So this is the
Brown.
white cakes.
Yes, that the word hedge means white. But the shape of the cake, which I'm following the meaning listed in the hieroglyphic dictionary, I don't agree much. It looks like a cake because it is a very tall cone shape, and we know that the cake is not that high. So that is the story. So you were talking about the white gold, and now we proved that this cake is white cake. Okay, so that is could lead to a similarity between the two stories.
Yes. Now, what's also very interesting about this is that when we go back into the Exodus story with Moses, when he's coming down the mountain, he sees the Israelites and they're, bowing before a golden calf. And in the story, the golden calf is melted down, turned into a powder, and they eat it. And it becomes a manna or a shamana. And we get this other story from Thutmose III, where they had something known as the Great White Brotherhood, the Great White Lodge that would have been out of Karnak, where they were obsessed with this white gold, according to the stories. And what we hear is that when they, or understand from this story, is that when they would eat it, something would happen to their bodies. So what we believe is that the elements from this particular substance are like regular gold, except the electron bonds have been removed from it. And so it operates like a helix in the body, and it starts to take the body and give it an upgrade from the morphogenic field around the earth. And what I think is happening here is there's some kind of a DNA regeneration, but these guys can give you some of their theories. Chuck, what do you see happening with this, and how is this important to your theories and how it ties into the Abydos Temple?
Well, like you, Johnny, I took some time to look into the David Hudson action about the monatomic gold. There was a lot of discussion about it. Lawrence Gardner also put across this. Velikovsky spoke of the manna that was on the ground. There was a lot of things that just didn't add up on a logical standpoint. So I began to look into what I felt was an interesting topic that started to morph, and all roads seem to lead to Egypt. So I'm researching into portals. The idea of portals, the whole concept of it, how it works, all that sort of thing. At the beginning, it just it wouldn't make a lot of sense. Then when I spoke with you and had some time to talk about the monoatomic gold, I started to understand a bit more, but it wasn't until we reached Abydos that I started to see how the picture could actually put together. So we know, and Mohamed had brought up the thing about the inscriptions or hieroglyphics of the Stargate. Well, is that definitive proof of a portal? Well, they're mentioning it in many, many places. Then we started to talk more about the white cake, and then as we walked through, and as you alluded to earlier, all of a sudden we saw the 9 hieroglyphics, the beautiful hieroglyphics, still survived, and each one of them had the handout with the cake on it. That started me thinking, how much further can I go with this portal concept if I start to look at all of Egypt? Now, the reason that I came down was all started with Pythagoras, the music of the spheres. So that part was almost set aside until we started to talk about how would you travel through a portal to another world. The monoatomic gold would be one aspect, a preparation of the body. There's a theory that everyone claims on regeneration. They like to speak a lot about regeneration, but what I'm also looking at is that in order to prepare for all these things, there was so much preparations by the Egyptians for the afterworld or the afterlife that it just doesn't make sense that you would just make something for just one purpose. So I'm starting to put together from this last little bit more and more of the evidence. Now, I'm not absolutely 100% convinced, but boy, oh boy, I'm getting closer and closer to swinging over and seeing that this will be something that we could able to really put our finger on and say this might be the way we could able to transport our human bodies to another place through a portal.
Now, that's very interesting, because when we look over at Abydos, it would appear that we have these false doors to the netters, which I want to get into with Mohamed, and I want to ask him more questions about that and the history that we have with the temple. But when I would look at this temple, there's something Mohamed would point out to me on our previous visits there, is that he would say, you know, Johnny, there are 3 platforms with 42 steps. Okay, so we have the 3 levels of initiation. And the 42 steps would be associated with Osiris, which we get this ascension mystery attached to it. But when we started to see the various rooms attached to Abydos, it became quite clear that this was a Mfktz or white gold manufacturing place. This was a place of not only worship, but as Lawrence Gardner has pointed out, the ancient etymology is workship, which we start to see. And Jonathan made some very interesting observations and had some intuitive information come to him. Do you want to share about that, Jonathan?
Sure, Johnny. I'm a researcher into ufology, currently based in Mauritius, Indian Ocean. For me, this has very much been an intellectual and then an experiential journey over several years. I would say a few months ago, Johnny introduced the concept to me of monoatomic gold, which has been extensively described and discussed. And you know, there's something that really connected with me. I think a lot of the UFO case database suggests that there is an ability within the various groups of beings that are contacting people on the Earth, that they seem to have an extensive lifespan. Their form of technology is such that it allows them to often materialize and dematerialize in and out of our reality. And this can extend to the machinery itself, which is often the focus point within ufology, but it also relates to the inherent ability, biological or some metaphysical ability, to move in and out of reality. Now, coming to this temple in Abydos, when I arrived, very much like Johnny, I saw the 3 levels of initiation, 3 platforms before you enter into the temple. My preconception was that it was very much a priesthood training school or initiatic center. But however, when you go inside, there's so much more to this temple. It's extremely confusing for the observer to walk in and see so many depictions, and what I was surprised to see were, after Elizabeth had pointed out the Mfktz cake or biscuit that was confirmed by Mohamed, was to see this appearing in numerous places within the temple, to the point that it almost, in my mind, became a focal point for what the people were trying to tell us, or at the time, what the use of the temple was for. As we moved through the temple, it very much felt like there was an area of the temple that was designed for manufacturing or processing of the Mfktz. But this was just pure speculation and I would say imagination in my mind. However, when we move forward into the antechambers of the temple, I saw two parallel rooms, very lengthy in nature. And the first thing I did was look up towards the ceiling in the first chamber, and it appeared that there was a chimney stack, or a hole for a chimney. There was black burn marks surrounding it, or soot, and also perhaps essence of oil or some other substance that had stained the stone. And I asked Mohamed, what do you see? And he suggested to me that this was an area for cooking or preparation of something. I then touched the wall, and immediately, more or less immediately, without real explanation or analysis as to why or how it came, I saw a priest appear with flowing, wide gauge, sort of flowing green robes with a headdress. And I saw him preparing the final substance or liquid that was being put into a pot. And he then turned and walked out. I saw this figure turn and walk out of the cooking area and move into the sort of entrance to that area within the antechambers. I then saw three people, two assistant priests and what I assumed to be an initiate, who was about to imbibe or consume the substance that the priest had taken from the cooking or kitchen area, let's say. So, you know, it was curious. I wasn't expecting to experience this. It happened, and I can't deny that it happened. So I obviously told the group about it, and perhaps it adds something to the bigger picture. But it's certainly a very strong point of interest for me within the ufological field.
We clearly see the Mfktz being given in this temple. So tell me what you saw intuitively.
Intuitively, I saw that the Mfktz were being heated, or the cakes were being prepared, and I think we have physical evidence on the ceilings of smoke and on the walls, as confirmed by Mohamed, and there's indeed a chimney, or a chimney stack space in the roof.
So this is where the Mfktz was being cooked?
That's what I was being shown in this room, and then a priest in flowing, quite wide birth robes came out with the finished product and was administering it in a very private ceremony with about 3 people.
Incredible. They say that that was a very big tie-in to our discovery. Because everybody played a part in this discovery when we went into this place. And what I want to say that's so unique about this place is that, as Chuck mentioned, we have these Stargate reliefs that are on particular areas and doors, and we have these doorways to the netters, which go somewhere else. But what I think is unique, and I'd like Mohamed to touch down on this, is that behind this place we have the Osirion, which is an incredible place that is done in granite, where it's one can only think that it has some sort of unique function to maybe power the place up, if that's the case. Mohamed, what are your thoughts on this? If these are doorways to the netters or whatever this was used for, a cooking facility, could the Osirion or the Osiris temple in the back, could that play a role in this?
Look, according to the design of the Osirian temple, we understand that the walls and the sides were made to stand against very strong energy or heat, okay? But we may escape heat because the area is, there is no kind of threats or expected heat waves, okay? So we think about energy because the center of the building is giant blocks from granite weighing 50 tons and more, and the sides of the temple from quartzite. The rose granite at the center from Aswan, which is 500 miles away from Abydos, and the sides from rose or red quartzite, also big blocks weighing from 10 to 20 tons, which is from Cairo, also around 500 miles. So as if this place was designed in a certain way, the depths of the temple under the ground, and also there are some deeper levels from the floor, some going from 3 to 5 meters, and there is another one much deeper, and because of the mud we don't know how deep it goes. And we think the third or the fourth one, from going from under city temple, we think it is connected with the Nile, so it runs at least 20-25 miles to the east side.
Do you think it's possible, Mohamed, that it operates like a power plant?
I don't think. I am very positive that it works like a power plant, because that design for me, it doesn't make any sense if it is just a regular building. And I think who represented the flower of life there, he was aware with the energy flow in the place, and that's why it came to his mind, this design of the flower of life, which could be, from his opinion, as a network or relations of different energies together, creating a major energy. So that's why they made 9 flower of lives in this place, not just one, the famous one. There are 9 in total in between the 2 pillars.
That's incredible, and we know the 9 is significant, like the 9 sides of the pyramid, or the 9 pyramids that we find in these places. But Mohamed, I want to come back and ask you a few more questions about the idea of the doorways of the netters that are there. But Chuck, I want to bring the questions over to you now, because in the work that you've been doing, studying the network of how the obelisks would work and moving the energy from Saqqara into these different places, if we look at this place as perhaps having doorways or portals to other areas, and that this would have to be done on a, let's say, a holofractal or multi-dimensional level, and that the Mfktz was being used as a means to upgrade the body to facilitate this, how does this work at this particular place? How would this place be operating like an energy grid?
When I started doing this, I was having to look at a few things that were odd to me, and one of them was the work that Tesla had done. And when I discovered about Tesla, especially at Colorado Springs, one of the things he clearly stated in his letter to the American Electrical Association was that, and it's clear in there, that the sun powers everything. And he found a way of understanding how the ionosphere interacted with the sun's electromagnetic fields and brought power down to the ground. How he discovered this was that he noted that as the lightning moved further and further away from his location, he found that the power voltage that he was measuring out of the ground actually increased and kept increasing, even though we're looking at 100 miles away where this storm had moved to, but he was still registering a lot of power. So in order to power a portal, and theories by NASA, theories by all sorts of scientists, they would say that if you want to build a portal, you need a lot of power. Well, there just happens to be a lot of power in the sun. And if it's connected in the manner that by which I'm starting to put together, this entire area would be powered through the obelisk, from the ionosphere, from the sun.
Fascinating. Okay, so I also wanted to ask, I wanted to get your all of your opinions on the idea, if we have, the technologies here at Abydos. One theory that we had felt would be applicable here was also that this would also be how the Serapeum would be utilized. That these boxes would have a sort of an energy that works through granite, because granite is composed of silica, like silicone, and it works this way. And I wanted to get your opinion, if you will, Jonathan. Could you tell me, when you were there looking at these particular boxes, what did you think that their use was for?
Well, Johnny, again, from delving into the ufological field and the cases available, I couldn't immediately think of anyone other than now a personal friend, Antonio Portugal, who is a Bolivian researcher and writer, who formerly served in the US Navy as the son of an international footballer and highly regarded within Bolivia, where I was very fortunate to be shown around with him. And during that visit, he told me about a discovery that he and I believe 2 other friends of his made, entering into a cave system within the fairly close proximity to the site of Pumapunku, but the location hasn't been returned to by his friends or himself. But within that system, he found, so he tells me, and I believe him, what can be described as large humanoid beings, that we would call giants, I suppose, in a form of stasis or a sleeping or preservation state. And I can only relay the fact that he saw machines attached to these giants, and that was the first image that came into my mind when I saw the caskets. Antonio has written extensively about this subject and has released several books in multiple languages, and I really do encourage the viewers to check out his work. The impression I immediately get, and what I'm reminded of, is an incredible story that was recounted to me by a friend of mine, Antonio Portugal, who is an author and a researcher and expert in the archaeological sites of Bolivia. And he once told me in Bolivia that he and others found a chamber within a cave just outside of Pumapunku in Bolivia, containing a sort of giant in a sort of stasis type way of being. And there was also a cyclops in the same chamber. It sounds fanciful and incredible, but I believe Antonio to be a man of good character with an impressive background, and he has maintained a consistent line throughout the decades since writing his books covering this subject. Jonny, what would you say this is in your estimation of things?
We can clearly see that this magnificent structure that was done here in granite, it's massive. And we know granite is made of silica or silicone, like microchips. It is a conductor of energy, and it's an insulator. We have piezoelectrical energy. With these, we found all of them open in this underground chamber here at the Serapeum, except for one, which was blown up when we go back into the story of August Marriott in 1850. But what's fascinating about this piece in particular is that we see all this primitive writing, which according to Mohamed Ibrahim was probably put there by the priests during Greek times, and just contains sort of spells. And we see that even further over here, down here with an empty cartouche. This was going to be sold when we go over and look at the priests. They were going to sell it over to the kings to be used as a tomb, but there's no way that the people that did these scratchings in it were the pre-dynastics, who are magnificent. So what this was is that this was a regeneration chamber that when they would step in it, potentially after using the monoatomic white gold or the orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, the energy would come through them and it would transition to a place called the Plain of Sharon, which is absolutely amazing. But just check this out. What are they used for?
Well, they all contained specific things that were pertinent to whatever place, whatever entities came through. There was something pertinent to them. All these boxes were against the back wall because, as Mohammed noticed, the indentations, the boxes were behind that. They've all been pushed forward, then opened. In other words, to disconnect crystals, something of that nature, is far more important. The reason there wouldn't be a body inside or a person inside is because you would need air. Those are airtight. You would run out of air.
Wonderful. Mohamed, I want to ask you in particular, do you suppose that we have a direct connection here with the doorways that we find to the netters and Abydos, and perhaps the same sort of energy that'd be used at the Serapeum? And could you elaborate a little bit on the official explanation that we have for the Serapeum?
You talk about the seven shrine, what we call it the Holy of Holies, which in my opinion it doesn't make sense because it is one Holy of Holies. We must have one, okay? So if we agree that yes, there are seven holies at Abydos Temple, so the Osiris is going to be the last Holy of Holies, okay? He will be the one of those seven, because it doesn't make sense that we have seven holies of holies. Okay, but when we read the names of each one, we find that they combine the powers of all the important letters, like Amun-Ra, like Osiris, like Horus, like Isis, like Sokr, Betah, which is a very interesting combination, because especially in New Kingdom they always focus on Amun-Ra, Mut and Khonsu, some few cases Osiris, and rare cases Betah, but they called a netter from the beginning of the ancient Egyptian mythology, which is Sokr. Okay, the Serapeum, yes, is, in my opinion, is an extension to our stories about any power plant, ancient power plant, if it is the Osirian temple or Giza plateau. In my opinion, the Serapeum, with the size of the boxes and the design of the boxes, is playing as a kind of storage for the energy, or capacitor for the energy, and could share with the process increasing or enhancing the direction of energy. It could be the volume of the energy or the direction of the energy from the Giza plateau at north to south of Saqqara, and maybe further south to Luxor and Aswan.
Mohamed, can you say what you were told when you made the official inquiry when this place was opening in 2012?
Okay, the chief architect of the major company in Middle East, he said, "We don't know." So I repeated the question. He said, "We don't know."
What do you think they're used for?
What this place?
Yes.
I think different functions for storing the energy, or storing the devices storing the energy. So it is the battery itself, or storing the battery, or as a portal. So when it closes, it start functioning, or it is like doing like the greenhouse, enhancing the abilities of seeds to grow in different environments, or all of them together.
Thank you, Mohamed.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, so there's no doubt about it. We have a sort of a consciousness technology here that can bridge both worlds together. And the idea I had with this is that when we look at the three parts that the Egyptians looked at us with, they said that we had a Ka, a Ba, and an Ak. And the Ka is like your light body. And the idea with this monoatomic white gold, or Mfktz, is that it fed your Ka, your light body. And actually, when we were down in Dendara, in the crypts, and you look over at what's been called the light bulb glyph, but clearly it is a lotus on top of a Djed pillar, we see that the outline of the giant beings there have a Ka that's pronounced. They have tapped into this serpentine energy. There's a level of consciousness they've attained to attain this ability to bridge between both worlds. Now, what's interesting about this is, in the legends that we get about this stuff, is that when you take it in the right conditions, and you were able to use it towards the end of your life, not just as an upgrade or a regeneration, you would transition to a place called the plane of Sharon. This brings us into a multi-dimensional or consciousness technology hypotheses. Now, Chuck, do you have any ideas on where we can go with this in our modern day and age?
In all aspects that I've come across, because I look at it from a logical aspect. How did the ancient Egyptians lift all the stones? How did all these myths and stories, they all relate in some manner. We can't just simply discount what people say. And so what I'm looking at is how everything ties together in a multidisciplined idea. What Jonny talks about is exactly an area that needs to be investigated further. My world is that I'm now looking at, if you don't include the UFO phenomenon into these discussions, you will never really understand how everything really worked. We still do not have our own technology to a level that we can able to do what the ancient Egyptians have done. So in my world, I look at every aspect of it to make sure that we are seeing multiple disciplines in one area. So when Jonathan speaks about the UFO phenomenon, it's not just a metaphysical or an interdimensional thing. There's solid representation. There has been so much documentation. 30 million people around the world since the 1940s have seen some sort of thing that does not relate to our physics. We cannot discount what they've seen, but what we can do is we can take a look at how what they do, how it would relate to what happened in ancient Egypt. So as we've moved forward in these discussions, I'm going to look at the UFOs from a practical position, and I'm going to slowly introduce in my mind how the interdimensional aspect will work. Abydos was key to all three of us when we were talking about this, key for us to understand that it takes more than just wanting to go through a portal. We must prepare. And that makes sense when you see all the preparation and the tools that are necessary for the Egyptians to move forward. The telltale explanation for me was a very simple thing. That one hallway that ran up the slight incline to the Osarium, when I saw Ramses pulling the little small barge, it looked like, when I took a picture of that and zoomed in, it made so much sense.
Incredible. And Jonathan, what would you say was your takeaway from, I guess, an ultra-dimensional or consciousness expanding area when we were at Abydos? Like, where was the consciousness technology for you that you spotted?
Yeah, I think one of the 7 principles or hermetic truths is as above and so below. In my mind, consciousness and the nature of reality is what this is all about. As human beings, we're led to believe that we have 2 strands of DNA, and that has probably been the way it's always been. My view is that DNA is a blueprint or an interface between physical reality and metaphysical reality. Could it be that monoatomic gold was a means for the Egyptians and whoever else that may or may not have been using it to upgrade their awareness, their inherent energy, as Jonny alluded to, in terms of prana or the serpentine energies within the human body? And did this allow them to more easily access greater realms of reality? I believe that it may well be the case.
So wrapping it all up, that's how our discovery came together, that Abydos was a white gold or Mfktz manufacturing center. It was a place of worship, and the priests were going there to take this particular substance, when it was being made, where it was being cooked, and they were using it to access, I guess you could say, a portal system. And this was a way of upgrading their consciousness and their bodies, because we know the Egyptian royalty and the kings were considered to be half divine and half human. And this is very much backed up, because we know that if we go back to the discovery that was made by Sir William Flinders Petrie in 1906, the British had found piles and piles of this white gold over at Mount Horeb in the Sinai. And over there we learned from the 4th dynasty to the 18th dynasty that there was a great lineage of these people that were using it in this particular way to attain these states. And I only think this discovery is going to unravel to greater and greater discoveries. So please do stay tuned for more from not only myself, but from Mohamed Ibrahim, from Chuck Vanderbyl, and Jonathan Hauge. Thank you very much.